Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's just 1 minute past 2. Well done for getting back reasonably well on time. Good afternoon. It's now my privilege to introduce our third session, Maritime Welfare, Challenges and Responsibilities, with our 5 eminent speakers of Martin Foley from the Apostleship of the Sea, a double act with Lieutenant Commander Chris Wood from the Royal Navy and Officer Cadet Sarah Stevens from the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, Professor Neil Greenberg from KCL and other places, and Norman Schmidl from Columbia Ship Management based in Cyprus. We're going to have another sort of Q&A session at the end, so we'll play it as we did this morning, save the questions until then. I know I've got a couple that were batted off to this session from this morning, and I'll get those speakers probably to repeat those questions if we may. This is a group I can mostly identify with. Martin and I are both CEOs of maritime welfare organisations, and we do quite a lot of business in other areas anyway. Chris and Sarah, as you know, will be talking about diversity in the naval service. And many years ago, as the Director of Naval Service Conditions, I was actually had the lead for taking diversity forward in the Royal Navy, and I'm about to be told I probably didn't do it very well. But it's certainly come on a heck of a long way since I joined about 50 years ago. Professor Neil and I are fellow directors of the Forces in Mind Trust. I do the forces, he does the mind. And I hope he will soon be making a guest appearance at my Maritime Charities group to talk again about what he's talking about this afternoon, stress at sea, and what research and remedies might be available in this area. And finally, my wild card today is Norman Schmidl down the end. He'll be telling us something about the impact of the migrant element on crewing structures, which is a whole new ballgame, which I think not many of our people are as prepared as they might be. Nonetheless, today's conference and the sometimes uncomfortable subjects that it raises have probably put us all on the edge of our comfort zones. But is that not a fantastic thing? Why am I standing here as the Director General of a unique maritime charity stretching across the Royal Navy and the Merchant Navy and our fishing fleets? We've always proudly maintained that we're prepared to tackle any aspect of the human condition, be it unemployment or children or poverty or ill health or whatever, so long as there's a maritime connection. But until a couple of years ago, we really hadn't thought about it in a human rights context, and certainly not under that title. That was something for the United Nations, not simple sailors. In my Seafarers UK campaigning hat, I speak at quite a few events talking up the maritime world, the wonderful career opportunities that it offers to our young people, the need for the great British public to remember that we're an island nation and appreciate our total dependence on the sea and its people for our defence and our trade and our diet. Each year we run a Seafarers Awareness Week. We're often very youth-orientated and with a definite emphasis on fun. And we probably play down the dodgy bits, the harsh and sometimes dangerous environment, and the long periods of separation. However, of necessity, we also do quite a lot of necessary fundraising, perhaps at dinners and Royal Marine Band concerts, that sort of thing, when of course one plays up the danger and separation, pointing out what wonderful, strong and brave people serve at sea, and how much we owe our trade to them. And of course, we don't major on the fun and the comradeship and the satisfaction, or the runs ashore. And I know, as Kuba has pointed out, we have this dichotomy of message sometimes, but we need the awareness, but I also need the money. Those of us who have been to sea for many years have seen it from both sides. But human rights, and I think perhaps we all know a little bit more about what that phrase actually entails, is not a subject that has fallen comfortably into either camp, playing up or playing down. And I really have a personal hope that today will literally see a sea change in our understanding and appreciation of the subject. I vividly recall my first acquaintance with David Hammond at yet another drinks party in HQS Wellington, introduced by a mutual barrister colleague, and his passionate pursuit of this subject. Whether it was the wine or the passion, I'm not sure. I'm a great enthusiast for both. But Seafarers UK was sufficiently impressed by the cause to provide a reasonably generous wodge of seed corn funding to the embryo organisation, for which, and it was a bit of a shock at the time, we received quite a lot of opprobrium, which is a posh word for SH1T, from certain quarters. And that doesn't happen very often to nice guys like me who give away large wadges of money. But I think it made us all the more determined to pursue the subject and make sure we were on the right lines. I don't know why some people took that line, and regrettably, some of them still do. But I still believe that it was more political than rational. And let's not get those two mixed up. However, it was a cause that we really did come to believe in, and we've stayed pretty close to it ever since. There are some things which our Royal Charter does not let me do. As our name implies, we were founded to support UK and Commonwealth seafarers. And we're prepared to spread that a little bit towards the global shipping industry, but it does not, for instance, include migrants. Nonetheless, such legalities do not stop us being interested in the whole maritime environment and how it stitches together. And we've agreed with David that our cash will be spent on those elements of the programme which do fit within our limits. I really look forward to hearing what our colleagues here have got to teach us about their experiences, indeed, perhaps most importantly, their recommendations on what we can all do to improve the welfare element of the seafaring life. I will say that I was surprised, to say the least, when I arrived in the welfare world about 15 years ago, to see the difference between the way the Royal Navy looked after its people and conditions in the merchant service. We in the Navy were always told that our sailors, our people, were the greatest single factor, unquote. And if we didn't look after them, they wouldn't be so keen to fight for us. On that basis, the Queen and the service and some well-endowed naval charities provided and still provide a pretty comprehensive comfort blanket, including an in-service personnel and family services division. In commercial shipping, as we've heard, not universally, but certainly in some companies, it seemed that seafarers were seen much more as a commodity, a bit like fuel, to be hired or fired as need dictated. Welfare then, as now, was provided largely by charity. But as Cuba again has reminded us, we are, funnily enough, all human beings. However, there was no reason to be smug. Royal Navy sailors, and when I joined they were all male by definition, were fine if they were white, fit and heterosexual. While I do think things have moved on a very long way in the last 30 or 40 years, I do recall when the very idea of women in the Royal Navy was openly rubbished by some senior officers, and the life of anyone suspected of homosexuality was made, frankly, pretty miserable, except in one memorable case, which was an admiral. Similarly, the idea of being vulnerable to stress was seen by some in the service to smack of weakness, almost going back to the sort of lack of moral fibre from the world wars. And owning up to any feeling of inadequacy in any shape or form was not seen as a career-enhancing move. Perhaps Neil can make us understand this afternoon that, as I've said, seafarers are human, as vulnerable as other people, and indeed should seek understanding and help at an early stage. Just a personal story. My final point recalls when I was a young officer in a frigate, we had a seaman of obvious mixed race who was universally known as Chalky, with that unforgiving brand of what passes for naval humour, and we thought no more of it. Except that one night, during the middle watch, we were talking about something and everything, as you do, and this lad said to me, "You know, sir, it really bloody hurts when they call me Chalky, but there ain't much I can do about it." Lesson learnt by cocky young officer and not forgotten.